Agenda 21, Chapter 26. Recognizing and strengthening the role of indigenous people and their communities. Program Area. Basis for Action. 26.1. Indigenous people and their communities have an historical relationship with their lands and are generally descendants of the original inhabitants of such lands. In the context of this chapter, the term lands is understood to include the environment of the areas which the people concerned traditionally occupy. Indigenous people and their communities represent a significant percentage of the global population. They have developed over many generations a holistic traditional scientific knowledge of their lands, natural resources, and environment. Indigenous people and their communities shall enjoy the full measure of human rights and fundamental freedoms without hindrance or discrimination. Their ability to participate fully in sustainable development practices on their lands has tended to be limited as a result of factors of an economic, social, and historical nature. In view of the interrelationship between the natural environment and its sustainable development and the cultural, social, economic, and physical well-being of indigenous people, national and international efforts to implement environmentally sound and sustainable development should recognize, accommodate, promote, and strengthen the role of indigenous people and their communities. 26.2. Some of the goals inherent in the objectives and activities of this program area are already contained in such international legal instruments as the ILO Indigenous and Tribal Peoples Convention, No. 169, and are being incorporated into the Draft Universal Declaration on Indigenous Rights, being prepared by the United Nations Working Group on Indigenous Populations. The International Year for the World's Indigenous People, 1993, proclaimed by the General Assembly in its Resolution 45-164 of the 18th of December 1990, presents a timely opportunity to mobilize further international technical and financial cooperation. Objectives. 26.3. In full partnership with indigenous people and their communities, governments and, where appropriate, intergovernmental organizations should aim at fulfilling the following objectives. A. Establishment of a process to empower indigenous people and their communities through measures that include I. Adoption or strengthening of appropriate policies and/or legal instruments at the national level. 2. Recognition that the lands of indigenous people and their communities should be protected from activities that are environmentally unsound or that the indigenous people concerned consider to be socially and culturally inappropriate. 3. Recognition of their values, traditional knowledge and resource management practices with a view to promoting environmentally sound and sustainable development. 4. Recognition that traditional and direct dependence on renewable resources and ecosystems, including sustainable harvesting, continues to be essential to the cultural, economic, and physical well-being of indigenous people and their communities. V. Development and strengthening of national dispute resolution arrangements in relation to settlement of land and resource management concerns. 6. Support for alternative environmentally sound means of production to ensure a range of choices on how to improve their quality of life so that they effectively participate in sustainable development. 7. Enhancement of capacity building for indigenous communities, based on the adaptation and exchange of traditional experience, knowledge and resource management practices, to ensure their sustainable development. B. Establishment, where appropriate, of arrangements to strengthen the active participation of indigenous people and their communities in the national formulation of policies, laws, and programs relating to resource management and other development processes that may affect them, and their initiation of proposals for such policies and programs. C. Involvement of indigenous people and their communities at the national and local levels in resource management and conservation strategies and other relevant programs established to support and review sustainable development strategies. such as those suggested in other program areas of Agenda 21. Activities. 26.4. Some indigenous people and their communities may require, in accordance with national legislation, greater control over their lands, self-management of their resources, participation in development decisions affecting them, including, where appropriate, participation in the establishment or management of protected areas. The following are some of the specific measures which governments could take. A. Consider the ratification and application of existing international conventions relevant to indigenous people and their communities, where not yet done, and provide support for the adoption by the General Assembly of a Declaration on Indigenous Rights. B. Adopt or strengthen appropriate policies and/or legal instruments that will protect indigenous intellectual and cultural property and the right to preserve customary and administrative systems and practices. 26.5. United Nations organizations and other international development and finance organizations and governments should, drawing on the active participation of indigenous people and their communities, as appropriate, take the following measures, inter alia, to incorporate their values, views and knowledge, including the unique contribution of indigenous women, in resource management and other policies and programs that may affect them. A. Appoint a special focal point within each international organization and organize annual inter-organizational coordination meetings in consultation with governments and indigenous organizations, as appropriate, and develop a procedure within and between operational agencies for assisting governments in ensuring the coherent and coordinated incorporation of the views of indigenous people in the design and implementation of policies and programs. Under this procedure, indigenous people and their communities should be informed and consulted and allowed to participate in national decision-making, in particular regarding regional and international cooperative efforts. In addition, these policies and programs should take fully into account strategies based on local indigenous initiatives. B. Provide technical and financial assistance for capacity-building programs to support the sustainable self-development of indigenous people and their communities. C. Strengthen research and education programs aimed at I. Achieving a better understanding of indigenous people's knowledge and management experience related to the environment, and applying this to contemporary development challenges. 2. Increasing the efficiency of indigenous people's resource management systems. For example, by promoting the adaptation and dissemination of suitable technological innovations. D. Contribute to the endeavors of indigenous people and their communities in resource management and conservation strategies, such as those that may be developed under appropriate projects funded through the Global Environment Facility and the Tropical Forestry Action Plan, and other program areas of Agenda 21, including programs to collect, analyze, and use data and other information in support of sustainable development projects. 26.6. Governments, in full partnership with indigenous people and their communities should, where appropriate, A. Develop or strengthen national arrangements to consult with indigenous people and their communities with a view to reflecting their needs and incorporating their values and traditional and other knowledge and practices in national policies and programs in the field of natural resource management and conservation and other development programs affecting them. B. Cooperate at the regional level, where appropriate, to address common indigenous issues, with a view to recognizing and strengthening their participation in sustainable development. Means of implementation. A. Financing and cost evaluation. 26.7. The Conference Secretariat has estimated the average total annual cost, 1993 to 2000, of implementing the activities of this program to be about $3 million on grant or concessional terms. These are indicative and order of magnitude estimates only and have not been reviewed by governments. Actual costs and financial terms, including any that are non-concessional, will depend upon, A. The specific strategies and programs governments decide upon for implementation. B. Legal and administrative frameworks. 26.8. Governments should incorporate, in collaboration with the indigenous people affected, the rights and responsibilities of indigenous people and their communities in the legislation of each country, suitable to the country's specific situation. Developing countries may require technical assistance to implement these activities. C. Human resource development. 26.9. International development agencies and governments should commit financial and other resources to education and training for indigenous people and their communities to develop their capacities to achieve their sustainable self-development and to contribute to and participate in sustainable and equitable development at the national level. Particular attention should be given to strengthening the role of indigenous women.